Hi, welcome to the first of 6 episodes where we're going to be looking at the story behind Christmas. I guess a good place to start is to ask, how did we get Christmas? About 1700 years ago, the Roman Emperor Constantine decided he wanted an annual celebration of the birth of a little baby called Jesus about 300 years earlier. Being Roman Emperor, he got to do pretty much what he wanted, so he was able to hijack a Roman midwinter festival, and we got Christmas. Most of what we associate with Christmas came along much later, largely influenced by the writing of Charles Dickens. But there's no Christmas rulebook. We can each decide what we want Christmas to be. It can be about family, it can be a religious festival, it can be about parties, it can be about presents, the food, focused on the children, a mixture of all these things, or none of those things. But whatever your Christmas is, maybe you're just a little bit curious about that story about a baby born 2,000 years ago. Does that story have any meaning for us? Do we need that Christmas? A lot of myth and sentiment has been attached to the story over the years. But what is the story that the Bible actually has to tell us? What actually happened then? The story begins on page 1 of the Bible. If you're not familiar with the Bible, that possibly doesn't surprise you. But if you know a little about the Bible, you may find that puzzling. Something like the first 70% of the Bible, the bit called the Old Testament, was written long before Jesus was ever born. That's perhaps the first remarkable thing about this Christmas story. We have a little baby born to poor, insignificant parents in a tiny country conquered and ruled by the Roman Empire. But the story of the birth of that baby begins thousands of years before he was born. So how does the story start? Well, let's go back to the very beginning of the Bible, the very first book in the Bible, Genesis, and we're going to look at a few short extracts from the first 3 chapters. You may want to read those chapters for yourself later. What is the very first verse in the first book of the Bible? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God made everything. For the rest of that first chapter, we get a bit more detail on that. There's often debate about how literally we should read that detail, but whether you read it literally or poetically, there are 2 important points made at the end of that first page in the Bible. First point is this. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. So God made people in his image to be in a relationship with him. The second point is this. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. God made a creation, including the people, who were very good. Problem is, if we look at the world around us today, that doesn't seem to quite match up with what we see. We do experience great kindness from people, but also we see some horrific acts committed by people. There's much in the world which is good, but there's much which isn't. Here at the end of 2020, the COVID virus is one thing that springs to mind. So what went wrong? Well, people were free to choose how they lived. But for all to go well, they had to live the way God said. God made everything, so he knows how everything works, including us. God gave one simple rule to try and make that point clear. Let's read what that rule was. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. The point here is, did they trust God to live his way? The tree wasn't magic in any way. The juice wasn't poisonous. The message was simple. They could choose to do things God's way, not eat the fruit. Or they could do things their way, eat the fruit. But they had to remember God's way would work, their way wouldn't. So what happened next? Well, let's read on. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. They chose to ignore what God had said. They made their own decision about what was good. Of course, there were consequences to that. Let's see what happened next. The man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. They had destroyed that relationship between them and their Creator. We read next, but the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" That was, of course, a rhetorical question. God was in effect saying, do you realize what you've done? Do you understand what position you've put yourself in? That's when it became pass the buck time. The man immediately blamed the woman. The woman blamed Satan, who'd appeared in the form of a serpent to goad her into eating the fruit. They'd made the problem, but they didn't have a solution. So that could be the very sad end of a very short story. But we've got 5 more episodes to go. So what happened? The Lord God said to the serpent, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." God was promising to fix the problem they'd created. A baby was going to be born, the offspring of the woman. The forces of evil, Satan the serpent, would bruise the heel of that baby. They would attack the baby. But that baby would bruise or crush the head of the forces of evil. This baby would put right the problem that had been created. This baby would restore the relationship between God and people. That was the first promise of Christmas. Thank you for listening, and please join us for the rest of the episodes as we see how that promise works out.